think of it this way. It's not about absolute speed. It's always about the speed relative to others. If I can run 100 meters in Olympics within a minute instead of 10 seconds, that's still okay as long as everybody else is running even slower.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 138. Great Expectations. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. Looking back over the year, 2021, the second year of not being on an airplane.
Second year of being locked in a house. Significantly longer periods of time than usual, right?
Yeah. It's been an interesting few years, but 2021 was more interesting than others. So in this episode, we're just going to sort of reflect back on all the things that have happened this year. We'll talk tech, obviously, because we always talk tech, but probably not to the depth that we typically will. We'll save that for another day. One of the more interesting episodes actually happened towards the end of the year, and that was with Joyce Lynn from Postman. Probably one of the more fun episodes, just because she kept crossing the line that I think in my head I would never cross.
Okay, what was the line?
It wasn't bad. Well, no, it was. She was like, we were asking specifically towards the end of the episode of, I asked her, okay, well, what socials? The typical thing. And she said in a podcast, where can people contact? She's like, well, what do you mean? Do you want my home address? I was like, wait, what? I mean, I'm normally not very flustered, but that one threw me really for quite a loop. I was a little, it's like, because that's, number one, you don't ask anybody on that. And number two, a guy asking a lady for that is just like not over. So when she, completely went the other direction, it was like, okay, she's a very interesting person.
That's why you have me, so I can ask questions.
Yes, because I can't. And really, speaking of guests, we had quite a lot of guests this year. We had Brian on from Doppler talking about Universal Secrets Manager. We had the one episode, again, fairly recently with David Burkus about leading remote teams, and that's the one where you were getting ready for KubeCon and showed up at the last second, but that's okay. We talked about low-code quite a bit this year.
Yeah, and I still haven't used it yet, kind of significantly.
It's interesting because the one, I don't remember which one it was. I think it was the one with Mike Fitzmaurice, and we talked about it offline, that a lot of people in low-code don't have the problems that most of us traditional DevOps type people have, because their tooling has it all built in.
You mean users or developers of
developers
solutions?
Developers. Yeah, no, the developers, they just save it and there's their code running.
Yeah, but that really depends what you're measuring yourself against, right? Yeah, I recall that you also mentioned that on average, low-code community is a bit more behind. So kind of like, hey, if you don't know what hurts you, then it doesn't until it does, right?
Yeah, because the things are just so far buried, people just don't know. And it's like, yeah, oh well.
Exactly. I mean, kind of if it takes you, I don't know, like 3 months on average to release something, that's not bad in itself. That starts being bad when you realize that that's slow, when you compare yourself to others. But you can just as well live happily until the rest of your days thinking that once in 3 months or once a year is great, as long as you don't know how fast others are doing it.
But does that kind of speed really matter?
It does. Or to be more precise, it depends on the speed of your competition, right? Good examples are financial institutions. For them, speed did not matter until recently. And now it does matter simply because their competition is going faster, right? So think of it this way. It's not about absolute speed. It's always about the speed relative to others. If I can run 100 meters in Olympics within a minute instead of 10 seconds, that's still okay as long as everybody else is running even slower.
And speaking of speed, we had someone on this year that has quickly, see, speed, quickly, I'm drawing these two things together. She ended up being a rock star this year.
Anais. Yeah, she became, she showed all the signs of a rock star. And she's one. I think she was nominated and won like something CNCF. Like
CNCF Developer Advocate?
Of the year, something like that, maybe.
While we're recording this, I'll just go ahead and say it. She's, she was an ambassador for CNCF.
Yep.
And then was it at KubeCon? It probably was at KubeCon.
It was at KubeCon, correct. KubeCon North America.
So she was the top ambassador for the CNCF.
Nice.
She's a rock star. And congratulations still to Anais. It's very cool. And she just keeps on cranking out her little YouTube video. See, here I'm being very condescending to her, and she'd probably come up and slap me upside the head, which, okay, fair enough. So Anais, if you are listening to this, I apologize. Usually that's where we'd mess up. But she talked about developer advocacy or engineering. Currently she's at the time we're recording,
Civo.
She's still at Civo, working as an SRE.
Correct. SRE / developer advocate. Officially SRE, but she's obviously doing advocacy, yeah.
Civo. We haven't talked much about them recently.
Civo is awesome. It's they're trying to, and successfully I would say, to compete against similar smaller providers, cloud providers, with something relatively different, right? I mean, they're the first provider that I know of that is focusing only on Kubernetes. I mean, they have VMs, but I'm not sure whether anybody is using it. And almost certainly the first provider that actually uses K3S as a distribution for their Kubernetes service. And that's awesome. That's brave as well.
So let's stay there for just a second. Why do you say it's brave?
Basing your services on something that was not designed for that, really. I mean, an initial idea of K3S was to be on edge devices. At that time, nobody used it as a fully operational Kubernetes distribution for clusters running in VMs, right? At least not that I know. And it's always brave because it, now maybe exaggerating saying brave for Civo because that applies to many other companies, but it's brave when you know that it takes a lot of time, years, to build a service and then see whether actually your choices that are different than other people's choices paid off. Whenever somebody tries something truly new, that's always brave to me and worth the praise.
It is sort of interesting that Civo went with K3S, and K3S was open sourced by Rancher.
Correct.
Rancher was acquired this year by SUSE.
Yeah.
So why isn't there an offering from SUSE that is hosted K3S?
I think that now in Rancher, exactly, the web UI type of thingy, I think that there is an option to use K3S as well.
Oh,
I think so.
okay.
I still haven't tried the latest one. So it's based on unconfirmed statements.
We saw lots of acquisitions this year.
Lots of acquisitions and a few very big series of funding series, right?
Yeah. And we would be remiss if we didn't say there's also been a lot of security issues this year too. The whole supply chain, secure supply chain, has become darling of money, I think, or will become the darling of money in 2022.
Yeah, when I look at funding rounds, I have the impression that if you put a sticker security, you're going to get more money than anybody else.
You might get an extra zero thrown in.
Exactly.
If not 2 zeros.
And that's especially valid if you are startup in Israel. It seems that the whole country decided we're going to make a lot of startups and they're all going to be security.
It is interesting that looking at any of the Israel-based companies, we tend to see a lot of security-based companies. A lot.
A lot of security and a lot of difficulty or kind of avoiding open source. That's what I'm feeling.
Really?
Yes. Which kind of makes sense. It takes time for the whole open source culture and understanding the advantages to kick in a region, especially since most of Israeli startups are coming from military background. And you can imagine that that's not probably the bedrock of open source, right?
That's true. But at the same time, one of the other things that we saw in 2021 was policies. And from a Kubernetes perspective, we've seen OPA and we've seen, oh, help me, what's Kyverno?
Yes. Those are the two main ones, with Kyverno being more Kubernetes first type of design. But OPA is kicking big time. I see a lot of projects. Some projects not even directly related with policies, but based on OPA. It's in a way almost becoming, it reminds me in a way of Terraform, how a while ago new startups started popping up and basing their products on HCL without Terraform in the background. And I have a feeling that similar is happening with OPA.
But why Rego? Why Rego?
Don't ask me. Whenever I see Rego, to be honest, and I understand why something that is not declarative, like YAML, I understand that. But whenever I see Rego, I have that feeling, only if I could actually switch to Python, JavaScript, Go, something, kind of like, give me a language, kind of like, why Rego, exactly. I have a feeling that we would be better off if OPA was simply a set of libraries that you use in your language of choice.
Oh, maybe that's what we can write between now and the end of the year. No, I don't think so.
We cannot, but I do feel that there is always a need seems that there is always sufficient number of people who want declarative and people who want programming language. And I really think that OPA should be Go-based libraries or Python or whatever is the choice today.
That would make too much sense, and then let that library do whatever it needs to do the thing. We also had Patrick Dubois on for his annual 50 episode, which that was way back in, I was just looking at the old notes here. Where was he at? I just lost him again. I had him and I lost him.
We had him twice, right? This year?
Did. No, only once.
Okay.
Because we had episode 100.
Yeah.
And we're not to 150 yet. So he was on March 24th.
Okay.
And he'll be coming up again on episode 150, which at the time we're recording this, I haven't scheduled him yet, but this is episode 138. So we're getting close to having Patrick back on again. I've been noticing he's been doing a lot of VR stuff recently. Patrick's always doing very Patrick things.
Yeah, whenever I see some tweet from Patrick, it's kind of, okay, so this is what you're into now. Kind of like he changes I'm jealous how quickly he's changing his interests in a very positive way.
You're glad somebody else is doing it so you don't have to do it? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Like, man, VR. Oof. I'm jealous.
He's talking about doing recording in 3D or something. I can't imagine what his talks will be like. I mean, does that mean I have to get an Oculus in order to see any of the new content that Patrick's going to be doing? I don't know.
Anything but, I'm not very fond of Facebook, so anything but Oculus.
Oh, fair enough. Speaking of HCL, just a few moments ago, we had Rosemary Wong on. She's with HashiCorp, but she's also the author of a book that's gone through a couple of different title changes. Much like Joyce, Rosemary was a great guest to have on this year too. She was able to just again, I don't understand why some guests come on just because like they are so far out of our league. And it's just like, wow, how did we even have this conversation with this person? It's been another fun year, I think. And looking towards 2022, that'll be the starting of our third year. Can you believe that?
Is it already 3 years?
It will be in April or May, depending on which way you look at it, will be 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, actually. Yeah,
whatever the
you're right.
dates are, I can't remember.
I just need to divide the number of episodes with 50 approximately, and then I get the number.
Pretty much, yeah. We did miss one episode this year, or miss 1 week, I should say. But other than that, we haven't missed a week since we started. I think what happened when we started back in 2019, we had 3 episodes release, and we missed a week, and then we've been going solid since then. Then we missed a week this year due to some stuff going on with me, and then, I mean, it seems like doing a podcast once a week is simple, and it is, but it's not. It's a lot of work. And not only that, we added in, last April, we added in live streaming. You've boosted a lot of traffic and content on the DevOps Toolkit channel, a sister channel to this.
Yeah, it's growing.
It's growing.
That's
a great understatement.
But it's going back to the story of, hey, is it good or bad to release once in every 3 months, right? It really depends on what you compare yourself with, right? So you can say it's growing fast, or you can say it's growing very, very slow, depends what you compare yourself with.
This is an interesting conversation. I've had this conversation with a number of people that are doing podcasts and just producing content. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll just release something once every quarter. So we'll do 4 releases a year. I went, well, that's great if you're software, but as a content producer, people don't know who you are after 2 weeks.
To begin with, it's not great for software either.
It's not.
It's not.
But it's also not abnormal.
I would say that
it's abnormal today, but it's not abnormal historically, I should say.
I would say that 4 times a year, once a quarter is a bare minimum. And that does not include, now if you include patches, you multiply that with, let's say, 4 or 5. That means that you're releasing, if you're doing software at least once a month, if we include patches. And I'm being very, very kind of cautious now. I'm not going crazy like every day, every week, or whatever, kind of like that. But once a month, that's a bare minimum, including patches, I repeat.
Yeah, but when you're doing content, you can't release content here's the thing that's gone really bad is all the streaming services now do what we used to call day and date. Basically, hey, here's the 10 episodes. Go have fun. Go binge. Or, much like Disney Plus, they do 1 episode a week for the run of the series, 10 weeks, whatever it is. Not ongoing for everything, but if you're doing content today, you can't just drop it whenever you want. It needs to be scheduled. We show up here on Wednesdays every week. We show up on the live stream on Fridays. The DevOps Toolkit video shows up on Mondays. Wait, that's the first time I've said that out loud. We have content coming out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as a whole. As a whole.
And wait, what's Wednesday? Wednesday's
and then
podcast,
Thursday,
yeah.
Wednesday's the podcast, and then every other Thursday, which is okay because it's every other Thursday, we have the AMA on Toolkit.
That's 3.5 releases a week.
That's pretty good, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The important thing, I think,
it's consistency. It's consistency.
Exactly. I would explain it slightly differently. I would explain it as it's about setting the expectations and meeting those expectations, right? I think it's perfectly fine if you say, hey, I release my content once a month. I think that's fine. It's not something I would recommend, to be clear. But hey, I know the expectation. Every first day of the month or every first Monday of the month, this is happening. I think that's the same no matter whether we are talking about releasing software or content or something else. It's always about having clear expectations and meeting those expectations. And among other things, expectations is the schedule of something. We could be theoretically saying, hey, we are focusing on tutorials and we release 1 hour a month, once a month. That's also fine. or 10 hours something, or as long as we are meeting the expectations we set, and part of that those expectations is a cadence of something.
I agree that once a month content is okay if the expectation is that. There is a podcast that I listen to that they release one episode a month on the first Thursday of the month. But looking at everything else that the primary host does, that's actually okay, because there's stuff that happens on the in-betweens of each month that helps support that. So the primary is once a month. Going back to software releases, you have one release a month, and if there has to be a patch, you got it in the middle. I think that's what we'll end on. Great expectations, right? This is the holiday season, so we have great expectations of the holiday season. Christmas, which is what I celebrate. A lot of people celebrate, but not everybody does.
Christmas is one of those things that became international holiday that is almost unrelated with religion or nationality or what's not.
Yeah. So to everybody listening, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I won't go on and add out the list because that'll be another 20 minutes of holiday names that I don't know all of them. So Victor, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too.
And to all of our listeners, thanks for hanging out with us all this year, and looking forward to the next year. We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.